Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of What Makes You Click, where I get to catch up with some of my mates and we talk about various animal behavior, welfare, human-animal interaction type things. And my guest tonight is none other than Sandra McCune, who I have known for over 30 years. Sandra, well, quite apart from being a lovely person, Sandra is, I think you're my first vet nurse on this, on these chats. So Sandra qualified as a veterinary nurse before doing a zoology degree, then did a PhD with the great late Sir Pat Bateson at Madingley, and I will almost certainly want to chat to you about that. Anybody who's listened to a number of these will know about my stories of Robert Hind, etc. So I won't go through that story again, but it was you that said that was so typical of him. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then you should listen to some of the other podcasts. And then went to work for Waltham and basically ended up heading up their human-animal interactions section, and was instrumental in the partnership between Waltham and the National Institute for Health, which has resulted in multi-million-pound studies in basically looking at the efficacy of animal interventions in human health. And I think one of the remarkable things about a lot of the studies, with the first ones that came out, was how many of them were horse-related. There's sort of quite a lot of good quality horse studies there. And so anyway, so that's a brief introduction to Sandra. Sandra also actually happens to be a visiting professor at the University of Lincoln in both my school, Life Sciences, and in the School of Psychology. So that gives you an idea how talented she is. Hi, Sandra. How are you?
Hi, Danny. I'm very well, thank you.
Yeah, it's nice to see you. And as I said, we're still in COVID time, so we haven't seen that much of you. And I think you're probably the most local one as well, because you're just down the road, aren't you?
Yeah.
You've stayed there. So thank you for giving up an evening to chat to me. And the other thing, I guess I didn't say in the introduction, but I may as well kick off with this. You probably have the most misquoted piece of research in the field. The number of times I have heard people talk about the work from your PhD on cat temperament and said, well, paternal temperament affects the temperament of the kittens and the mother has nothing to do with it.
No, I never said that.
I know you never said that. That's why I said it's misquoted. But people, because it's very difficult to separate out maternal effects because she's nursing them, whereas you can do that with the Tom. And
it got a bit lost in translation, I think, because obviously there can be maternal effects, and almost certainly there are maternal effects. And in fact, Dennis Turner did show that there were maternal effects on, personality. But what I said in the PhD clearly was I'm only looking at male effects, so that because the kittens didn't meet their fathers, and therefore we have to assume that that's a genetic effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And whenever you read the work written by yourself or people close people, they get it right. But I've been to so many cat meetings, and it's amazing, isn't it, how the Tom affects the temperament of the kittens and the mother doesn't play a role. I'm thinking it would be amazing if that was the case.
Yes.
But I've heard it so many times. So your PhD was on cat temperament. Now that would have been late 80s, early 90s. I have got it written down here.
Yes, I finished in 93, just at the end of 92.
Okay, I think I first met you in 91. I think I first met you in 91 in the BVA headquarters with the founding of the Companion Animal Behaviour Therapy Study Group, which is now the British Veterinary Behaviour Association. And there was you and Meg, I can remember, as vet nurses. And I chatted to you at the end, and I thought, but so let's talk about the PhD, shall we? I mean, there's lots of other things, but that's a good starting point. And so in the late 1980s, there weren't many cat PhDs around. So how did it come about? And I know you've had a long-standing passion from cats, but what I didn't know until earlier today was that you grew up in a household without pets as well. So
yes, yes. In terms of, I was unfortunate enough to be born into a house where pets just weren't in favor. In fact, I would say my parents were quite anti-pet. And so, you know, despite being pet mad from a very early age, I distinctly remember my first book token I ever got as a present went on an encyclopedia, Collins Encyclopedia of Wildlife, which I devoured. You know? But so, yes, it was amazing, really. And I had to go outside of home to really seek time and work with animals, which I did through volunteering at a local shelter and so on. But it is worth probably just thinking back to the late 80s, because not only were there very few cat PhDs, there was actually very little work in terms of animal welfare on companion animals at all. So cats and dogs. And, you know, we were coming out of sort of Bramble Committee kind of years that had led to, you know, people looking more and more at animal welfare and taking seriously animal welfare. Don Broom had just been made the first chair of animal welfare in the world. He was the advisor on my project. And actually my PhD nearly didn't happen either, because, well, firstly, nowhere to do anything like that, not even remotely in Ireland at the time, which is, I'm Irish, as you can probably hear, and that's where I was living. So a friend advised me to try for Cambridge, and I did, and knew that there was a cat colony there, and it was a sub-department of animal behaviour at Mattingly, Cambridge University, and they had an outdoor feral cat colony, and they had a sort of indoor with runs type, you know, tame pet cats, as we might think of them, inside. And so I met with Pat, which consisted of me rocking up to Cambridge train station, him buying me, I remember, a pretty awful cup of tea, and having this chat over a cup of tea, which in hindsight was his interview of me. You know? Anyway, we got on well. That was great. We had a very good chat about animal welfare. And I eventually arrived to start the PhD, and the first person I met was another PhD student just starting. And he said, "Oh, what are you here to study?" Told him. And he said, well, you won't be studying that. I said, "Why not?" "They've decided to close the cat colony down." So that was like literally the first morning I arrived. So I went into Pat and sort of said, "What's going on? You know, I've come to study cats in this particular area, as discussed. Sounds like we don't have any animals." And he said, "Yes, we've decided it's too expensive to run and we're going to close it down." And so for a term, I really tried hard to have a look at other areas of science and to come up with something that I wanted to do. And basically, I remember one cold, foggy Cambridge day in December, went into Pat King's and said, "My heart is not in these topics. I can come up with academic topics of interest." I said, "But actually, I want to study cats. Can we have a rethink?" You know? And I said, "Is there no way, you know, that we can put together a campaign to reopen the colony, or some supply of money that you might have access to, or whatever?" And sure enough, he did. But only because I really put the pressure on him, actually, you know, in my gentle way, not so gentle. But we had the discussion, and he realized I was probably going to quit if he didn't let me do cats. So I was the last of several cat PhDs at Mattingly.
So the Mike Mendel and Fever.
Yeah, there was Hilary Fellman, Julie Fever. There's a few people before us who'd used those cats.
Just to be clear here, was there actually a PhD advertised, or you just wrote him on spec? You just wrote him on. No, I'm a Dublin lass. I'd like to come over to Cambridge and do a PhD. That's the way it works. Is that? It was
as naive as that, actually. Yes, I mean, sometimes people think I have a lot of neck. I think I'm just really naive, and I always kind of assume the best.
I can relate to that. As I said, I bumble into things, and ignorance is bliss, I think, in a lot of these situations. And I have an expression actually that I say to my students is, don't look up to anybody because you're asking them to look down to you. Treat everybody as an equal. By all means, respect them and respect their reputation, but as a human being, everybody is equal. And it's I think it was Churchill that said, isn't it, sort of, a dog looks up to you, a cat looks down to you, only a pig looks at you as an equal. And that's a Churchill quote. But I think it's true. And, you know, I kicked off these podcast because I was thinking about, especially a lot of the people I met when I was a student and I went around the US, and I just wrote to these people on, well, I think in those days I used those blue aerograms, that were like tissue paper.
Yeah.
But I just handwritten notes, sort of been given your name as somebody who's good in behaviour, sort of. I'd like to come to the States and spend some time in your lab. Would that be okay? I'm trying to arrange it around sort of one summer. So depending when you're available will affect whether or not I can come, but etc. And they all said, yeah. And as you say, it's not about being pushy, it's about being ignorant, I think.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah, no, I think that's lovely. And I think, because inevitably when when you ask me to do this, Danny, you sort of sit and reflect a little bit on, what is this journey I've been on for these years. And one of the things that I just kept, seeing again and again, if I thought about it, was just how generous people have been to me throughout my career, with their time, with their knowledge, and generally really, really encouraging. And Pat was one of those people, so I did literally just write to him from Dublin, hey, hi, I'm doing a zoology degree, and I'd love to come and work on cats. Could we meet? And he said yes. But it was an interesting interview because along with the cup of tea, he asked me some questions about myself and that, and I think to find out a little bit more about what I was sort of interested in. And I was very interested in animal welfare. I'd been doing quite a lot of reading of animal welfare at that time. And so what he did was, which was quite cheeky, I think, in hindsight, was he gave me the draft of a book that he'd been asked to edit, a whole book, which was on
Bateson and Turner. Oh no.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. No, it was completely different. But it was a philosopher that kind of was slightly relevant to animal welfare, but not completely, and asked me for my comments on it.
Oh, that's very smart. What was the book?
I'm trying to remember. I can't even remember actually what the book is because I'm only just thinking about it now.
We'll find it and let me know, and I'll put it at the bottom because that is so smart. But he's such a nice guy, Pat Bateson. And I'll tell you my story. This makes you feel better about him giving you a bad cup of tea. He threw up in my car.
Oh dear.
But in his defense, and Pat's such a nice guy, he came up and one of my former colleagues, Sarah Ellis Larter, as she is now, she just invited Pat to come up. Would you come up to Lincoln and give us a talk? And Pat said, yeah, I'd love to. I like this part of the world. Pop up. So we took him out for dinner. He got food poisoning.
Oh no.
And just between the restaurant and getting him back to the hotel, just bought a brand new car for my wife. Sat in the front and it threw up fish.
Oh dear. Oh, that's awful. Poor guy. Poor you. Oh dear.
But he did come back again to chat to us. So that's
amazing.
We were really worried though, because he wasn't. I was just thinking, oh God, so Pat Bateson, FRS dies, Lincoln kills leading cat professor.
Kills one of the founding fathers of ethology.
Yes. So anyway, so that's one of my Pat Bateson stories. Okay, so you've persuaded him that doing something on cats would be a good idea. Did he just give you free rein, or did you choose the topic of personality or temperament? So
I came to him with no money and a rough idea. And amazingly, he said yes. And that thing about naivety, I came to the UK by coming to Cambridge from Ireland, and just assumed I would find funding. And I think actually, thinking about that, that's an attitude that has stood me in really good stead my whole career. I always assume I'll find money, and I generally do if I want to do something, And so I thought, well, I've got a bit of a loan from the bank to get started, £3,000 or whatever it was in those days for fees. And I thought I'll just write to people and I'll find. And of course I found that much more difficult than I had thought. So I think I wrote in the end to over 70 people. But a wonderful guy with a trust in London gave me £100, the Peter Nathan Trust, And that opened up the doors to other funders, actually. Once I'd got one thing, and then I got the fellowship from BVA, Animal Welfare Foundation, and that was the funding for the PhD. But I was already about 9 months in when I got that, so that was quite a relief. I could live.
Wow.
So yeah, no, I sort of came up with a topic, and then obviously, you know, I had lots of chats with Pat as well to take it from an idea, and it was ideas that I'd been thinking about and obviously had been reading about, but also it also came from a lot of practical experience. So I had already, you know, been a veterinary nurse, trained as a veterinary nurse, which is all in practice in those days. I'd worked in shelters for 3 years as a volunteer, loved cats, and had cats then for a couple of years. Once I got out of home, I had to leave home at 17 just so I could have pets, you know. That's almost true. And so I had really good, you know, handling skills and skills around manipulating stress, and actually some of that early kind of background, even from a really early stage in the shelter as a 13-year-old. When I look back in it, I realized I was sort of developing hypotheses, if you like, ideas about, you know, why here are 2 cats in front of me, and one is doing fine, and one is really, really struggling. And as the days go by, this cat that was fine within 10 minutes, as far as you could tell, you know, is absolutely fine after that period. And this other cat is hardly habituating at all, even day 5, day 6, you know. So what's the difference in cats that do well and those that don't? And it turns out about 10% of cats really do badly. And I saw that as a vet nurse. And while I was a vet nurse, again, sort of developed the very beginnings of the kind of universal stress score, you know, that I developed later on as part of my PhD, by having a really, really simple score, which was, as you do your rounds in the veterinary hospital in the morning and throughout the day, is this cat in front of me better, the same, or worse than it was the last time I evaluated it? Incredibly simple, actually incredibly powerful and quick, as well as all the other things that you take in a normal hospital round, you know, but that was a universal score. And that then became part of the PhD in terms of trying to develop a system that picked apart, if you like, broke down the animal into its component parts and say, what is it that you're using to get this overall assessment that that cat is better than it was yesterday? And it came up with a 10-point score that then Turner and his colleagues then refined into a 7-point score.
Yeah, so again, just in case people aren't aware of the fact, the cat stress score was originally part of your PhD, and everybody thinks about it in relation to Dennis Turner. And I did one of these podcasts with Dennis. He makes no claim of that whatsoever, but people always associate it because he simplified it down to a 7-point score, and did a series of studies in relation to it and published them, and therefore people link it with him, but it's actually your work. I just want to go back on one thing because it sort of reminded me of something I saw the other day, which I thought was quite amusing. But I think it illustrates the point. And you said, you know, having been in practice working with cats, you were generating hypotheses. And it's something I feel quite strongly about, sort of much more now, is that, we need to be teaching young people about this because they are doing it. They often don't realize it and don't have the confidence. And so much of it seems that the curriculum at the moment is sort of based around, well, you've got to do this, and it's so fact laden, rather than teaching people the skills of how to think like a scientist, which is what you were doing. But the thing I saw, which I thought was absolutely brilliant, is a picture of a kid standing by, you know, a school where they had to go off and do an experiment and present it. He got this big poster behind him. How much sawdust can you add to a cookie or to a flapjack before people notice? That's brilliant.
Yeah, brilliant.
But that's also brilliant science.
Yeah.
And this is what people, you know, nowadays need to know. You know, that's what science is. But, you know, as long as you don't put anything poisonous in, but it's, you know, it's measurable and it's answering a real question. You know, and I bet you most of the food manufacturers knew the answer to that question.
Yeah, it's really interesting you bring this up because I know I've said this to quite a few people, but one of, I think, the biggest differences probably when I first rocked up to Cambridge and started to do a PhD. And a lot of students or student projects now, first of all, very few of them are observational studies nowadays at student level, because there isn't the time and all the rest of it. When I went to Cambridge, I was told to go and observe my animals, the colony of cats I would be dealing with, and to look at them for basically about 3 months to get to know the individuals. First of all, you're able to identify individuals, and then you get to know a little bit about, okay, so they're more, I've seen signs of that type of behavior in that cat. You start to put together personalities for them. And you start to then get interested in the dynamics between them. And the idea of that was, firstly, because it's good to know your animals, and secondly, it was that you spend that time generating hypotheses. And then you choose what you think are the interesting hypotheses that someone else might be interested in. And only at that point do you start doing what might today be recognized as work. And it was incredibly useful, just that the power of observation, and also being encouraged to look at some of the other species that were there at Madingley, to take an animal that was very different from the one that you were tuned into, like a bird or a primate or whatever, and then start to pick apart what it was for them that differentiated individuals, and then started to understand some of the dynamics. So really learning to look was so important.
Yeah, and I take your point, because it's a shame. Obviously you want people to be efficient or whatever, and they say, well, you got to, there's a lot of pressure for PhD completions within 3 years. And as part of that process, then actually that initial phase of just immersing yourself in something, and and you might end up going in a completely different direction. That it's very truncated now. You have to do much more, but I like to think that whenever I take on PhD students, I give them more guidance than I used to, and it took me a little while to realize that if you give people too much freedom, they can easily drown, not knowing. So they need some guidance as to what they should be looking at. But a number of years ago, I was interviewing for a postdoc position, and we had some very good applicants, one of whom, had lots of papers to her name. She looked really, really good on paper. Turned up at interview, and it became apparent that basically her PhD, she'd been a lab technician. She'd been told, do this, do this, do this, and she'd done it, and had never actually thought about anything. And I thought that was so sad, because here was somebody who was clearly very talented, but for the project that I had, I needed somebody who could think through and lead on the issues. And she churned out a ton of papers from her PhD, but unfortunately, I'm not sure that she got that much of a scientific training. So it's it's sad when you see it like that, but it's getting that balance right. Let's talk more positive. I don't want to be negative. So you got your first experiment. What was your first experiment then? Can you remember?
Yeah, so the first experiment and the big central part, if you like, of the doctoral work was looking at individual difference in cats when they were confined, and it was this question, really, what is some of the variation that explains why some cats do well and some cats do less well. And so what we decided to do was, there already had been studies which showed obviously effects of socialization, early socialization on friendliness. And obviously, if kittens are socialized to humans, in this case, they will be friendlier than kittens that aren't, and kittens that have no socialization, as most people will know very well, will never really be friendly to adults, at least not in a generalized way. And also there had been separate work done by Dennis Turner, which had effectively sort of shown this genetic effect on friendliness. And so what he had shown was that kittens from a friendly father who was at Madingley and an unfriendly father, you could be differentiated on just the basis of the friendliness of their father. So I wanted to sort of pull those apart a bit. And so what I did was I did a first experiment, which was So we produced 4 groups of kittens effectively from those 2 factors. And so at one end you had friendly socialized kittens, and then right at the other end, the least friendly were from the unfriendly father. So they were the same fathers that were used in Dennis Turner's work. They were still around, and unsocialized. By unsocialized, I don't mean they had no contact at all. So they had contact with cleaners, people who came in to do the husbandry, but they had actually very little socialization. The socialized cats, you know, they went through a whole socialization program, 5 hours a week.
I'm just thinking here, you've gone to a place where they want to close the cat colony. Now you've persuaded, oh, we need to breed more cats.
Oh yeah, I did.
I can see why you ended up in industry. I really can. I raise money. I tell people that we're going to do the opposite.
Yes, totally optimistic.
Keep going.
And so when these kittens were, so that created variation within the group, and then at a year of age they were tested, and they were tested in little rooms where they were put in to habituate, and then a person went in who was familiar, so that was me as the familiar person, and then we sort of repeated this with an unfamiliar person, and so what you find, as you might expect, is that if they were from a friendly father, so if they were friendly or if they were socialized, they were quicker to approach the person. There was not much difference actually between the familiar and unfamiliar people. There was a lot more affiliative sort of behavior, so you know, proximity, being rubbing up against them, you know, purring in some cases, tail up, all the usual indicators of greeting in a cat and so on. And they stayed much closer to them for longer and approached them much quicker. What I did, and this was the crafty bit really, was I repeated that experiment with a novel object. Because what I'd started thinking was I'd been looking at Dennis Turner's definitions of friendliness from these 2 fathers. And I thought, I wonder, is it actually social, or is it actually an effect of boldness generally? And it just happens that he's tested it in relation to a novel object that is a person. So what if you test them to a novel object that isn't social? And that was this sort of box that we made up where you could sort of go in one side, weave through it, and come out the other side. And what we found was that whether you'd been socialized or unsocialized didn't make any difference at all. Okay, so that didn't differentiate, but the friendliness of the father really did. And so that's why that work was reinterpreted into a boldness effect. And so the cats that were friendly, in that sense, a genetic contribution to friendliness, and had been socialized, because those 2 things interact as well, completely changed that cat's perception of the world, to novelty, to people, to potential threats, because these cats I followed through into Wood Green Animal Shelter to see how they would do at the end when we were really closing down the cat colony and they all had to be homed. I thought, well, I want to follow them and see actually how they do in a real world situation, so not just a lab situation, under that kind of actually a bigger threat than just a novel object. And it turned out that they could be distinguished. It wasn't all sort of sitting effects, you know. And so those friendly socialized cats did really well going through a shelter. All the rest did about the same. So it was really differentiating them not into 4 groups, but into 2.
Wow. And how many ended up in your home?
2. Yeah, 2.
And did you pick the friendly ones by any chance?
Of course I did. Yeah, I did. So yeah, there was, and it was nice to be able to do that. And that's the other thing I do hear misquoted slightly, and it's my own fault actually. You know, is that, well, those results were all fine that McCune did, but you know, it was in a laboratory setting and it's not real world stuff. The wood green stuff, which is just one final chapter in the PhD, has never really been published. It's been presented at several conferences and it's been published in sort of, you know, very small like magazines and things, scientific magazines, but not properly in a peer-reviewed journal, and that's why it's not known. But actually they were then exactly the same cats, and that's the strength of it. Yeah, because we created the variation, but the strength of it is we're looking at it in a very controlled environment, and then in this real world much less controlled environment.
Well, there we go. It's said here for posterity. It'll be captured on YouTube for that. So you finish your PhD and you then end up working in industry, which again is that's quite, well, it's quite different to a lot of people that I've chatted to. Most of us sit in academia, so we don't need any interpersonal skills or anything. So how did that come about?
Well, okay, so I give you the honest version of this, right?
Yeah, I said I'll edit
Okay.
out any bits you don't like, don't worry.
Yeah. So I'd finished my PhD, you know, collapsed in a heap as you do, and I started to look around for jobs. And to be honest, I couldn't see anything that looked like it had my name on it. And I sort of began to wonder, my goodness, I've done this really niche PhD in not even companion animal welfare, but cat animal welfare, you know, that nobody else wants to know about. I'm unemployable, you know. And I was off for a weekend somewhere and happened to see in New Scientist, which is where all the jobs were listed back then, this ad that I really struggled to interpret the language of, because for want of a better phrase, there was a lot of corporate speak in it. And I thought, I don't really know what this is, but I think it might have something to do with cat behavior. And it was a job in the palatability team. So testing food preferences of cats with Waltham, which is a global research center for Mars Petcare, still is. Waltham Centre for Pet Nutrition, as it was while I was there, and just recently now it's the Waltham Petcare Science Institute now. And as you can see, there was nutrition in the name. So, you know, it was like, is this all about nutrition and food? I don't think I'm particularly interested in that. But sure, I'll fill it in anyway while we're driving away for the weekend.
Why not? You know.
And that's what I did, without a phone call to anybody, nothing. And I got called and ultimately got the job. But actually, I'm really glad I just took a chance on it, because there's a huge variety of roles in Mars, because it's a huge organization. You know, I don't know what the latest is now, 110,000 or something people globally. It's enormous. Wow. And Waltham itself, I think at that stage was up to about 140 people as a research center. You know, it's a lot more now. But there were roles in this one team which involved feeding behavior, and very quickly I commandeered the projects that were to do with the cat and the owner. And right. So, you know, looking at where the interaction was, what the influence was of the owner on the cat's feeding behavior. And then, you know, we had a look at various things. Later on, we looked at cat cognition. We did a paper together on that, didn't we? Years ago.
We did, yeah. Amy
Johnson, wasn't it?
Johnson. Yeah, Johnson.
Maybe.
Amy someone. Yeah.
Amy someone. And so you know, it was sort of fine as a first job. I got interested into it. I was allowed a lot of freedom to design the studies, given a sort of topic of what they were interested in. All of that was great, and you know, did that for a few years before I then sort of started doing other things as well. So
I know this is something you feel, well, strongly about. I don't know whether that's not. You're always so mild-mannered, but I'm sure you've got that fiery Irish side, certainly in our family. But you know, people sometimes say, yeah, no, but it's not doing proper research if you're in industry, or, you know, you're very constrained in industry with what you can do. You know, it has to be all focused on, you know, the bottom buck. And I know that you feel that wasn't your experience. And certainly, as I said, I do a lot of commercially sponsored research, and I'm given an enormous amount of freedom. But, you know, when you were at Waltham, you say you had quite a lot of freedom to pursue things, even if...
I really did. And particularly as I became, you know, a team leader of different teams, then I had a huge amount of freedom to direct, you know, the kind of research, and the internal studies, certainly, you know, complete control really over how they were designed. But then they have an enormous evaluation process. I mean, much more now, actually. It's much more developed now than it was when I started there, you know, like a lot of science institutes. But it's got to go through you know, peer approval, internal peer approval, external peer approval. It goes through an ethics committee, just like it would in academia. all of that. But in terms of, putting together a basic design, a protocol, that kind of aspect of it, I've had enormous freedom. The commercial stuff, as you progress through the business, of course, takes a bit more of a role, because you do have to justify, why you're spending X amount of money on doing these experiments and what you're likely to get out of them. Because there are many ways in which they could use that same amount of money doing different things. And so, but I think that's the same in academia, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think it's an interesting one, because I think sometimes, again, I've come across a view which is perhaps a little naive about industry, which is, well, they should just fund HAI work because it's just a good thing to do. And actually, they're a corporation, they're a privately owned family corporation. At the end of the day, what I and others had to do was to stand up at those senior management meetings and present work that we thought was interesting and was relevant, and always make that case for why it was a useful thing for the business to do, for business reasons as well as science reasons.
But an interesting thing with with Waltham, and some people might not know this, but Waltham is part of the Mars Corporation, which is the Mars family. And like a lot of the chocolate manufacturers, they were, mine's gone blank. Religious faith.
Not sure where you're going.
Religious faith of the chocolate manufacturers.
Nestle? Are you talking about?
No. The religious faith of a lot of
the
people.
Religious faith. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, they were Quakers.
Quakers. Mine just went blank. So they were Quakers, and yes, that means, first of all, when the first time I went to Washington to the Mars headquarters, it's such an unassuming building, and they didn't. It was. I was told sort of, the Mars family come in, they do their own photocopying. They have about 2 administrative assistants in the whole thing, and it's about that egalitarian. But I remember being at one meeting, and it was one of the Mars daughters, I think, that had come over for it, and she said something along the lines of, well, we're a successful corporation and we have to remain successful and it's our responsibility to shape the sort of world that we believe in with the right values. And I thought, and I'd never heard anybody in industry say anything like that before. And, and having seen that they're sort of relatively unassuming Quaker background, and you just think, it gave me a very different view of, and clearly, philanthropy is such a big part of American culture, which it isn't in the UK. But it was sort of, it's a philanthropy with a social responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good description of who they are. They're very, if you met them in the street, you wouldn't bat an eyelid. They're generally a humble bunch, really. And they'll drive up in their small rental car, and and they look like anybody else, really.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because what it's like. Every corporation, every business, these days has a sort of set of values on the wall. But actually, it was their kind of great-great-grandfather, in fact, who developed those. And I think it's really easy, actually, to be cynical about them, because we're so used to them today just being plastered on without meaning anything, really. But I have worked quite a bit on those 5, the Mars principles, as they're called, and I'd be hard put to come up with a better set of 5. And they genuinely do lead the work at every stage. So, even in research, you're thinking about the 5 principles. Mutuality is one of the ones that is a bit different to some other corporations' ones, where you expect there to be a mutual benefit in any work that you do. And if you're getting your benefit at the expense of the other person, then actually that's not healthy business. And that's a very strong principle that is a bit different, really, I think, to a lot of places.
Can you remember the 5 principles?
Oh.
I didn't work for them, so I can ask that.
I can do. So
quick Google.
Okay. So it's quality, responsibility, mutuality, effectiveness, and freedom.
Freedom. There we go.
Yeah. It's down the middle of me, if you open me like a bar of rock.
But I mean, and people always there used to be a sort of joke around here that if you went to work for Mars, you either you know, if you made it past the first 6 months, you were probably there for the rest of your life. You'd have the chip inserted. I mean, is that, I mean, well, obviously, I mean, people like Roger Mumford came out of it after a while and set up his own business. John Bradshaw as well. As well. And I forgot to mention at the introduction, you've obviously set up your business. So if anybody wants to pick Sandra's brain, you have the Animal Matters Consultancy Limited, and I'm sure if they Google that, they'll find the details there. But I mean, you lasted
26 years.
6 years, yeah. That's a long time to be in one place. But your role changed enormously in that time, though, as well, didn't it? I mean,
yeah.
And how much did you play in, seeing as you can persuade Cambridge professors not to close cat colonies, how much did you shape your destiny in Mars Waltham, and how much of it was sort of the business emerging? Because again, you know, I can remember as a student a little blue book that came from BSAVA about human animal interactions. It was proceeding sponsored by Mars. And you know, Nestle had the odd little thing as well, and so and the pet food companies were really, I think, the primary drivers of human animal interaction research in the companion animal field. And yeah, there is a business case behind it, but it doesn't negate the importance of it. And a lot of the stuff that's now happening on health benefits wouldn't have happened if we hadn't had that initial push from that. But
yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I had a lot of freedom to help shape the role, and you know what I felt was needed from both the science point of view, but knowing the business as well, what would also work for the business, so that it was a mutual benefit. And that was an interesting thing, because for years they were, you're right, you know, they did fund some of the very earliest work, and it wasn't actually just research. One of the important things I think they did was, you know, if you go back to the 70s, say, or the early 80s, at the very, you know, the beginnings of this field of HAI, the people who were doing it were these brave souls who were scattered usually as one person in a department somewhere, and you know, enduring the wrath of their colleagues because they thought they weren't doing proper science. You know, this will be familiar to you.
Yeah. And
what Mars did was they paid for them to come together and to meet and to discuss design and, you know, what does a good control look like for this, you know, difficult questions on your own in isolation, and help them really start to develop a literature, you know, studies and a literature that they could then review. And those were the precursors to what is now the IAHIO conference, which, for people who don't know, is the International Human Animal Interaction Organizations. I've left something
International Association of Human Animal Interaction Organizations. Yeah.
Thank you. And they're the biggest single, you know, professional body for HAI, human animal interaction, in the world. So they sort of provided them with a bit of infrastructure and some support to get them going. And then they did do some studies. All of that was before my time, actually. All of that. So Ian Robinson, some people might remember.
Yeah, I remember Ian.
Yeah, he led the HAI program, and then it sort of went fallow for a few years, and then what actually happened was that I was leading a team within innovation, which scoped out new potential areas of science for Waltham, so much more broadly, you know, than HAI. But one of them was basically what became the HAI program.
You just happen to find this area thinking there's enormous scope here, and I just happen to be the right person to to do that. It's funny that, isn't it?
Indeed, yes. But I mean, I looked at all sorts of things. Yes, indeed. But one of the things we did, and this was easy to convince the family of, because actually they were already pushing, was if we are going to relaunch HAI, we recognize that the quality of the science needs to be better, and it needs a big shift, a big investment is what that means, actually, you know. And so that's what I did. I started that new HAI program of research, and, you know, we reached out to the field for applications. You really had to support some of the newer researchers at that time. They'd sometimes never done HAI before. I mean, you know, there was still the likes of Erica Friedman, who, you know, I can't teach anything to. But there were also a lot of younger researchers who needed support, which is why initially they became collaborative projects, working with them to do the studies at a distance, but collaborative. And the family were great. They were very, very supportive. In fact, insisted on that idea that actually we need to do this differently. And what came out of that was the public-private partnership with the NIH, the National Institutes of Health. So for those who haven't heard of the NIH, biggest public funder of health research and science in the world, billions of dollars a year. And that was what really, suddenly we went from a lot of very, very small studies and some bigger good studies to that, to a different kind of playing field, where we had a question when we started that. The academia was asking, would an HAI application, could you have an HAI application of sufficient quality that it would make it through an NIHA review process, which are notoriously hard? So that benchmark they set is pretty high. And the answer to that we found out very quickly was yes. Okay, so we were getting the smaller RO3 grants, but the bigger, several postdocs kind of level RO1 grants as well in that first round. And so that really, really helped just put a sort of a stimulus into HAI research. And we worked a lot as well on infrastructure and supporting early career researchers. So doing the other things that help a young field like HAI was, to grow.
This is a terrible admission, and I should know this. Is Waltham still supporting that program?
Yeah, they still have it.
Okay, they are still actively involved in supporting it.
There's a November deadline for the current grant.
Right, okay. I should have known that. I'm going to be in trouble at work. Oh dear. And that visiting professor that you recommended to us, she should have put something. We'll talk about it over the next year, maybe next time. So of those projects that you've seen go through, which have been the ones that have excited you most?
Oh, that's a good question. Excuse me. There's a lot of great projects, and I like different ones for different reasons. But something like Sabrina Shook's work with ADHD children with a dog reading program was just great, because there's a lot of reading programs starting to develop, which, let's face it, didn't really have much of a solid science base to them. She had a very well developed program in California at Irvine, and they did a really nice RCT trial and looking at this particular intervention, as well as sort of other support that they would get, and indeed a parent program on the side. And they just found, she was amazed at the results, really, because it didn't just help in terms of sort of behavior when they tested social behavior and various aspects of behavior that might be impacted by ADHD and ADHD diagnosis, but it actually also affected the symptoms, and she didn't expect that. So the symptoms of ADHD were affected themselves in the condition, and that's a really nice piece of work. But then there's also some quite quirky ones, So one I really liked actually was a little study where they paired looking after a goldfish in youth who were type 1 diabetes in terms of their self-management of diabetes. And what they found was that if they paired their own care, so that was daily activities they needed to do for testing their bloods, and then weekly activities they needed to do in terms of their management, if they linked that to daily care for the fish as well as a weekly clean out, there was much higher compliance, which is often very poor in teenagers. And so that idea that you could use or you could work with an animal and a companion animal to actually really motivate somebody in terms of some of these longer term conditions that we have in the Western world, at least not type 1 diabetes, obviously, but even with type 2 diabetes, you might expect that. Or obesity or whatever, smoking. There has been one small study which looked at people being, even when they couldn't give up for themselves, if you explain the damage that was doing to their animal in the home, also being exposed to that was a motivator. We know, well tested now as motivators of physical activity, and obviously we in the past done some work on that as well, with Carrie Westgarth in Liverpool, looking at dog walking and looking at dogs as motivators for walking generally.
Yeah, I have a PhD student at the moment, Anna Maria Barcellas. I don't know if you've met Anna, but I mean, she's very smart, and she's very good. And the project she's working on is focused on thinking about the benefits of pet ownership, but not asking whether or not somebody is a pet owner, which is sort of the crude measure that a lot of people tend to use. And having spent much of my career trying to solve people's problems with their pets, I know it's not something that's universally positive, but actually tease out what are the things that bring both pleasure, but also other positive benefits to quality of life. So, for example, giving you routine, a sense of purpose and things like that. And she's now replicated it because she's from Brazil, she's replicated it in a Brazilian population. We've looked at cat owners as well as dog owners, slightly different, obviously some things you don't do, but the idea is, first of all, to find out what it is that people do with their pets. And it's just sort of remarkable that nobody had systematically gone through with pet owners, it seemed, and tried to tease out these, and sort of what people at least perceived to be the impact. The study, actually, which we've just launched, and I'll try and remember to put the link, I'll make a note, with this, is having now sort of got a degree of robustness, is to now try and do it in a quantifiable way. And then we've just actually got a little bit of funding from Nestle, actually, to then do a cohort study. To then look, what we want to do is, right, you have this pet, if you can do more, let's record how much you do of this, and we make certain predictions of how that will actually affect you as well. I mean, ultimately, it'd be nice to be able to get to something like an RCT on that, but
always tricky with pets.
It is
randomly assigning animals, you can't do it really.
But randomly assigning them activities and making the predictions then on the basis of that. But it's just trying to get away from that idea that pets are good for you. Well, yes, if you do the right things, but if you don't walk your dog, you're not going to get the benefits of dog walking, funnily enough. And
indeed,
they're myriad.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It needs a lot of pulling apart, I think. And I think particularly, as you say, you talk about cats, with dog ownership, a lot of it is obviously bound up in, what you see when people get dogs is they then increase their exercising because they're walking dogs. Okay, no big surprise. But actually, even if we go back to James Circle's longitudinal study that he did years ago now in the UK, he did see, at least not for as long a period, but he did see for a period of time, benefits on minor health benefits from cats as well as dogs. I think there's been enough studies that have probably separated those two things now, so that you get a bonus effect. And it's not just that you're walking more with a dog, but it's also that, as we know, dogs, are these sort of, that term social lubricants, they're connectors is what I prefer to use. Really, I often say that's their superpower, is they connect us to ourselves and them. We connect, but then when we go outside, they really help us connect to other people. And we know that from studies, people are more likely to talk to you for longer and about more things and all of that. And the social capital work that I did with Lisa Wood in Australia, showed clearly of the societal benefits that go way beyond just the individual, but that sort of ripple effect that goes through society because people are out and about with their dogs.
You mentioned that because I think it was, well, I did go to Australia and they had this urban animal management group, and the guy who set it up, unfortunately, he died of a heart attack, didn't he? Quite young. But and it was really weird because I'm sort of never really given it any thought, but this idea in urban animal management, we tend to think of stray cats and dogs, but theirs was all actually about designing your cities and towns so that people could have animals, and so they become connected and they don't become, it becomes a community and it supports each other and it becomes viable. And that just blew me away, that sort of stuff.
There's a huge Sorry.
I was just going to say, it's one of the things that I know you've been involved in, and perhaps just say a little bit more about it. But
Yeah, there's a huge overlap actually in terms of urban design between people who are thinking about walkability, so that's what they call it, the walkability of an urban area. But basically, if you set up an area for walkability, which means you've got good, clear pavements, you've got safe spaces where people can walk, they've got places that they can walk to and then interact with other people. That's all beautifully made up right there for dog walking, and then the dogs facilitate even more connection. And so, yeah, I mean, I've been involved with some of those guys about thinking about how do you design an environment so that actually it's easy and safe to walk dogs in. And then we looked at what they were doing anyway with people and said, well, it's pretty much the same thing. You need a few extra facilities, and you do need to think about park design, and you need to think about maybe whether there's some facilities for poo bins and places for bags and all that kind of stuff. And that's where you get in then to the sort of pet friendly cities kind of initiatives that there are, particularly in the US, but also in the UK. So again, the business Mars ran a competition for that, and Melton came out as the most pet friendly town in the UK.
There we go. So that's one thing. I cannot understand why dog walkers think it's okay to tie poo bags to trees. The nearest village shop is across the fields from here, and there are poo bins in this village, there's poo bins in the next village, and there are poo trees between here and there. And I just think, who thinks, someone says, oh yeah, well, they come back to pick them up as they're doing the circuit and whatever. No, they're not, they're still there. And that's
I don't know. Can't throw any insight onto that at all, Danny.
No. Anyway, so that's my moan. But that's why you need poo bins at regular points. But come on, you got a poo bag, tie it up, put it in your pocket till you get to the poo bin, please. But yeah, so there's that sort of social capital side of things. And as I said, it was something new to me, and I've heard you talk about it several times, and I sort of start to hear from, some of my colleagues like Peter Gorbing, working with Dogs for Good, that actually councils are starting to see the value of it. And, a few of the more forward-thinking councils are starting to say, actually, we can save money in this sort of investment. And, the economic downturn that we've been going through with everything actually may well be an opportunity because people's budgets are squeezed, they're actually looking at some of these things and thinking, well, actually, it can work. Quite apart from, he was telling me actually about one case when they looked at the cost of somebody with severe social anxiety who wouldn't go to school, and then, the long-term costs further down the road, then actually making sure that person has a dog, and if that gets them out and gets them back to school, we ended up doing that book on companion animal economics together, didn't we? But it was that sort of thing. And I think there's just so much latent potential, and the danger is, as I said, that people want to generalize and say, yeah, everything is wonderful, and it's not. And I'm really pleased I'm going to catch up with Hal Herzog, because he'll give me a long list of where it's not, I'm sure. But yeah, so
I think it's very much a sort of, it can become at its best a sort of virtuous cycle, really, and that's what the social capital stuff is all about, really. So that it's this idea, there's all different kind of parts of it, but the idea of when people see people out with their dogs, their perceptions of safety of the neighborhood and friendliness of the neighborhood and trustworthiness of the neighborhood, those things are changed. And so people feel safer when they go out with the dog, but they also feel safer when they see people out with dogs as kind of extra eyes on the street, as it were. So it then rolls over into things like local economic benefits, less vandalism, those kind of aspects are associated with higher social capital. And it turns out dogs in particular are a driver of social capital. But always want to mention the cat effect here. So it is strongest. So the social capital of pet owners is strongest for dog owners who walk their dogs, but it's significant for other pet owners. And that's not that effect. It's not the effect of I see you with your dog and I recognize the dog. And so I say, hi, how's the dog doing today? It is, even if you have an animal at home, it gives people something to talk about, to start conversations that are interesting, sometimes funny, but they're non-judgmental from a kind of, faith, religion, that kind of level. And what we know from the social capital work is that it then eventually develops into other forms, tangible forms of measurable social support.
And I think, and it's the connectedness of it. It's as you say, people are interesting when they're talking about their pets. And you see it at work, there's a small picture of the partner and then there's a big picture of the cat. And which ones people would rather talk about as well. They don't really want to hear about their husband or their wife. They want to hear about the cat. And I think through the COVID crisis, everyone's got used to seeing cats in front of cameras, or the back end of cats at least.
Indeed, yeah. But it's great that your group has been doing more cat work, because the cat work really is so far behind the dog work. And I think, again, one of the themes that sort of struck me as I was thinking through, starting from literally as a volunteer in shelters, is how so often you see people who could have a much better relationship with their pet, with some slight differences, and so if they just had a bit more understanding or a bit more training, and I think, whereas we've seen this kind of almost an explosion really of canine science in the last 10-15 years, and it's starting increasingly to be applied to our understanding of companion animals and working animals, that hasn't happened really at all yet, not really, in terms of applying it to, it has a bit, some of the work you've done, I should say, obviously you can apply it, but, in terms of applying it to how to have the best relationship you can have, for want of a better phrase, with your cat, I think we've still got a long way to go, and we need the funding for that. And then, the research will follow. So.
Well, as I said, we, at least at the moment, we have the advantage that we've got lots of really keen master students, and they can do really good work. It's a good way of seeding projects like that. The project, we had a project, I've lost track of time with COVID. I think it must be over a year ago. Maybe it was because it was a part-time student, and he did this study on sort of cat owner relationships, and we published it. And the university, something had come up about the university had said, well, we can't do a cathedral graduation, and so we will offer people an online graduation if they want a graduation ceremony, but we will do the cathedral one. Well, the newspapers got hold of it, and they sort of, universities cancelling graduation for students. And I was chatting to one of the people in the comms team at Lincoln. They're saying sort of, this is broken out. And I said, well, I've got a bit of research. If you want some positive publicity, this master student has done this. We've just written the paper. It's about to be accepted. If we make a quick online version of the survey so people can characterize their relationship with their cats, and just make a note again, I'll put the link up there. I'm sure it'll generate a lot of positive feedback. Well, so I think it's I can't remember the exact figure, but it's something like 85% of the traffic to the university that week was to this site.
Brilliant.
People trying to profile their relationship, and I got so many. It was really weird, because often, with some of my research, when it gets some publicity, there's always some people who say have some negative spin on it. And I don't think I got a single negative email about that. I just got emails saying that's spot on, and it was nice because it was people all over the world. So it seemed to be fairly translatable. It was about people's perceptions of their relationship. So, so I'm sure we'll do lots more through the master's program. And you've since leaving Waltham, Mars, I don't know what the official, whether you call them Waltham Mars pedigree, you've continued with your human animal interactions interest through being a trustee of SCAS. And SCAS SCAS is an interesting organisation, Society of Companion Animal Studies. Again, when I first graduated and was a student, there was sort of, SCAS was there, and it was about the only organisation that was doing anything at all. And then it seemed to sort of fade away, and now it seems to be coming back again, which is probably you persuaded. So I think we need to do something here. So, I mean, how did you end up with SCAS? Because you weren't a trustee, were you, before you left Mars?
No, I wasn't a trustee, and Waltham was a corporate member, and so I couldn't be an individual member. But I'd always had a lot of time for the group, and also for just that idea of a national sort of HAI organization, and it was one of the very earliest in the world, and one of the founding members that were the founding organizations of IAHIO, the umbrella organization, and our chair is currently Dr. Liz Ormerant, who's Vet of the Year, SIVA Vet of the Year, and just has done extraordinary work over the years on lots of different aspects, but she's just an amazing woman. So I'd always sort of fancied, when I'm out of Mars, getting involved. And so that's what I did. And I'm on the board, and I'm on the research working group and on the conference working group. But one of the things I guess I did lead probably was putting together a communications team. So again, very much with my background in science comms in Mars, I just thought, well, what hit me, and I said to them, was, you have really fantastic content. Nobody knows about it. It just wasn't getting distributed to where it needed to be effective. And so hopefully the communications team will really help that in the future as we go along. But it's obviously not just me. I could help put that together, and I'm part of it. But it's a team of 4 people, and 2 of them are volunteers of an extraordinarily high standard. Who will, one is a professional, and one is a person doing a PhD, her second PhD, this time in HAI.
As you do.
Yeah. But we had an extraordinary shortlist, and it was just that idea of maybe in COVID time somebody's actually looking to get a bit of experience and potentially some coaching and all of that. These guys are so good; they need very little. There's a little bit.
It's nice to see though, because as I said, I remember SCAS, and SCAS really were. Yeah, they were at the forefront. They had some great conferences, and then they just seemed to sort of, as I said, fade away, and you sort of think, well, what's happened to them, and there seemed to be a loss of momentum. And okay, we talked about the big investments with NIH, but yes, SCAS existed before the CABTSG, or the British Veterinary Behaviour Association, and whereas that has gone from strength to strength, sort of the SCAS, the human animal interaction side of thing in the broader context, just seemed to lose the momentum, which I thought was really sad, because they were quite influential for me in the early stages of my career as well. So I think it's great that they're picking up again.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you're right. They did go through a sort of a fallow period, for a better word. But I think they are back. They've got a great group of people on the board. And what I would recommend to people are their webinars. They do monthly webinars, which are free to members, and just a relatively small amount for non-members. And we get a real range of topics. Kirsten Mentz is down to do one from University of Lincoln, child development work with LHAI. I've done a couple, and other people, and they're really good. And we've just had a very, very successful conference. And I think, if I chaired the conference for the day, but this is not about me chairing the conference. This was just about actually the people who were there were so generous in terms of the way they interacted, the way they were questioning the speakers, the offering of resources to people who were looking for some way of doing something. And the speakers were incredible. They made themselves so available to questions live, and gave their emails for further contact afterwards, all this kind of thing. And I think maybe sometimes with a smaller organization, you can do that a bit more. And of course, we're all missing going to conferences, so actually that aspect of it, where it felt a bit more genuinely interactive, was really nice.
And I mean, SCAS is not, although it's UK focused, you don't have to be UK based to be a member of it, do you?
Not at all. It's quite internationally focused, actually. Yeah. And the big thing we're sort of focused on at the moment is our main communications priority and in our research is the issues around pets in rental housing. And not just rental housing, actually, but people who, for whatever reason, when they have to get housing, are really limited in their choices because they have a pet, and sometimes they have to choose between being able to keep that pet or take the housing that's being offered, which is sort of typically in people renting at typically a lower age group, or people that are no longer able to live independently at home and they're having to go into some sort of care facility that just isn't set up to be pet friendly. So we're working with a whole group, and we're having a spring meeting where we'll invite people from around the world to take part in that. And what we're hoping to do is actually set up a new international group focused on that issue to be more effective.
No, it's a really important issue. So the other organization that I wanted to ask you about, and this is one that I didn't know much about, is the Annenberg Pet Space Leadership Institute. Now that seems to be the other end of the extreme, because that, having looked it up, it seems to be a sort of initiative of this billionairess.
It is,
So, well, put it crudely, what's all that about?
Yes.
I've looked in Google and I've seen the sort of glossy website. Where did that come from? Because as I said, I probably should know about it, but I've not heard of it before.
Yeah, no, it's been around for a few years now, particularly the pet space. So Wallace Annenberg is the head of this family. She's actually the daughter of the founder of the, and it's a very large American philanthropic foundation, as you said, much more of that kind of thing in the US than here. But what she is really keen on and has a real understanding of actually is the bond between people and their pets, and how important that can be and how powerful that can be, you know, in terms of support and benefits and so on. And so they set up one of their big projects, and they have many. They're known more for like publishing industry, and apparently have the Oscars party when the Oscars is on, because that's their world as well. But part of the world is the Annenberg Pet Space, which is an actual space. It's a shelter, for want of a better word, although it's a very, very nice looking shelter. And they do adopt dogs and cats through that, but they also try to be much more in terms of promoting the bond and sharing that message that actually pets are wonderful, and here's all the sorts of things, you know, about them that we want to talk about. And so they're also involved in training, but they will offer a lot of courses. So they may offer courses in just things like, you know, it could be grooming, could be toy play with your puppy, it could be all sorts of things to do with regular pet ownership, or about pet care and about pet welfare. And they work really closely with the other shelters in California, because they're based in LA, to take dogs from them to home them through their shelter, or vice versa. You know, so they work really closely together, well networked. And one arm of that is they wanted to invest in science, in HAI, so understanding this. And they had a workshop. The workshop I was invited to, which was a second workshop, was just before COVID broke out. In fact, I caught COVID in LA, leaving that workshop.
That's why you were in the States.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. But they'd had one before that, and these are lots of people you would recognize the names of, you know, Clive Wynne, James Serpell, whoever, lots of people. Anyway, I got invited to the second one and gave a talk there. And then one of the things I've been doing in my consultancy is helping them get a special research topic through Frontiers that are papers based on the talks from that conference, working with a couple of other editors as well, but sort of heading up that work. So we're just about at the end of that. We're just about to release the ebook, because our very, very, very last paper of 13 from that series in Frontiers is just out. Mia Cobb's paper, which is looking at a review of 10 years of canine science as it pertains to working dogs, and another one on the genetics of working dogs by a group. So they're free to download, and There's all sorts of interesting ones in there, actually.
So, I mean, are they looking to have future meetings? I mean, where are they with COVID having interrupted?
Yeah, COVID has interrupted things, as you can imagine. You know, I mean, it obviously affected all shelters and indeed foundations with donations. You know, went down a lot for a lot of foundations. I don't know the specifics of theirs, and I think potentially they've said, you know, in the future they'll be interested in future workshops potentially. You know, I keep mentioning the word cat because they've had two on dogs already. So
yes, and it is meant to be a pet space, not a dog space. So they do need to redress that balance.
Yeah. So hopefully they will. And I think they're still exploring how they support the science and leadership in the field, in the scientific field, as part of their overall endeavor to sort of just promote pets and the bond between people and pets.
Okay. Now I've got some. So these people don't think these things are totally random. I don't do well, you know me. I don't do a heck of a lot of research, but I do sort of do a little bit of background stuff. One of the things that because anybody that I do these chats with, I say, can you just send me a CV, because there's always interesting things there. One of the things that jumped out of your CV is how big a blogger you were. I didn't sort of, and you're also, and maybe because, as I said, you've worked in industry. I've got an account on LinkedIn. I never go into it though, but I know some people do, and they find it really useful. And you seem to be a big blogger on LinkedIn.
I have been at different times, not so much actually recently. You know, I think while I was at Waltham, certainly, you know, I was blogging as part of my profile, and I've done a couple since then, but not so much recently. But I am very active on LinkedIn, so and also Twitter.
And I mean, sort of, I know this sounds terrible. Why? Why do you do this? I mean, as I said, I've just not got into LinkedIn. I don't know why. But I mean, well, it's out of interest. Is it something that organisations do encourage? You think a lot?
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it is taken seriously.
Oh yeah. I mean, you know, Nancy G will be the same when she headed up the HAI research. She'll have done some blogging for that. Other people will within the business, more and more the leadership actually will be the ones talking about, you know, just different aspects of either health care for animals or HAI. But you know, inevitably it is linked to an overall business which depends on people having pets, you know, so those are the topics that they want to talk about, and it's just raising awareness. For me, I kind of these days, if I'm honest, I mean, at its most basic is, and you'll see I post a very broad range of stuff. You know, it tends to be things which I just think, oh, that'd be helpful to know for somebody. So, you know, vacancies, funding, are quite often doing those kind of things. Or just a bit of science that's just really interesting, a paper that's out, you know, that, or if it relates to an interest of mine, then I'll just help promote that. I think we can really, really help each other as scientists in terms of the science comms world by, you know, if we like something, share it, you know, post it. And it really is helpful, particularly, I think, for younger researchers. The other thing, though, is you'll see I repost quite a lot of SCAS posts. Okay, well, I mean, they're comms team, you know, so no big surprises there. And also quite a lot of Annenberg Pet Space stuff, because I've been working on the communications of that series. So when, you know, I will just make sure it gets out there, and the few people who follow me at least know about it.
I guess sort of part of my problem, well, one of my many problems is, and with all of these things, there's so many social media and things. I'm trying to work out which ones should I actually be engaging with and which ones shouldn't. And okay, I will make a resolve after tonight that I will perhaps open up my LinkedIn account and do more than just accept requests, which is what I tend to do. And well, maybe because LinkedIn, there's LinkedIn Learning now, which I know the university's got involved with as well. I don't get involved with that. But actually, the reason I first went on social media was John Bradshaw. And it was years ago when John said, I think, maybe not quoting him exactly, but he said something like,
he finds 60% of new papers through Twitter. And I couldn't believe that, because I just didn't use Twitter and it never occurred to me. And it's true. It's a brilliant way of just coming across new papers from people who you follow, people who are genuinely interested in, that are close to your areas of research that you're working on. And, we all keep an eye on each other. And of course, we'll find them in other ways eventually. But actually, it's very quick just to have a post with a one-liner about what it is.
I mean, I you probably know through my Facebook page, I tend to churn out stuff there, and when I get an interesting paper, there's an interesting one I saw today. One I posted today for the vet was from the Vet Record, which was this idea of getting away from the term gold standard and talk about contextualized care, because the word gold standard implies there is one gold standard, whereas contextualized care implies that you're adapting it for it. What people need varies, which I thought was actually quite a nice idea. So this is the new veterinary humanities group. So I posted that, but the other paper, which I haven't posted because it's only available as a preprint, and I don't know which journal it's in, but I thought it was quite fascinating. And it looks like this guy at Washington, I think it's Washington State, did this study with undergraduates, because two of the author affiliations are undergraduate programs. And basically what they did is they looked at the shock, the traditional stuff where you give rats shocks to condition them against things. And they decided to do it in a real world context rather than a laboratory. So they had the rats in their much more naturalistic environments, and they find they don't condition with the shock. Yeah. And it's a sort of, it's an artifact of the laboratory where there's nothing else going on. They won't make that association between the shock and the tone stimuli and stuff like that. However, if you give them the shadow of an owl, oh yeah, it's like that, and you think, whoa, which I thought was quite.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. I want to see which journal it's for, just because you never know sometimes with some of these preprints whether it's real or not, but it certainly looks genuine. But there was a case I had many years ago where somebody thought that their dog had ADHD and they wanted their dog prescribed Ritalin for it. And I was sort of, well, there have been a few studies, but then none of them are very good. And then they produced this draft of this paper as like a preprint. And they said, well, there's this study. I looked at it and I was thinking, I've not seen this. And it was this double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled study. I think sort of 60 dogs in each group, and these were the effects in this group, and and then the placebo, and it seemed to be well analyzed. And I was thinking, I've never heard of the author, and no, was there? I'm trying to think, was there was a hint as to, I'm not sure whether there was an author or whether there was a hint of the institution, but it wasn't totally clear. And I was thinking, I don't recognize either the affiliation or the primary author. And I said, well, leave it with me and let me have a look at it. Well, I started to do some research, and what I could find was, that was it. When I found a version of the document online, I could see that it was associated with a certain institution or a certain professor at an institution who I contacted, and he said, oh my God, he said, that was a student assignment where they had to make up an experiment and write it up as if they'd got real data or whatever. And, he gave it as a sort of, what I want you to do is, first of all, design a study, make up a data set and analyze it. And this student had done this. And he said it should be on, our secure internal server for just academics, but it's leaked out. And, here I was with a client who thought this was a real study, and it was written it was written as a draft manuscript for submission.
Wow.
And you think, whoa, it sort of reassured me. Yeah, it was a good reason why I hadn't heard of it. But you just think, yeah, I mean, that's the sort of thing you got to be careful of. So he found it quite amusing. He'd retired, but I kept thinking, I ought to write a letter to the vet record just to warn people of this, because if you've got clients saying, I want my dog on Ritalin, here's this great study, and you think, you need to find out. Which sort of, the other thing I noted on your CV when you sent it through was you'd recently done a thing for Rip Off Britain. I was just intrigued as to,
Oh yes, I did. I've never seen it.
So again, for people who don't know what Rip Off Britain is, it's about rogue traders and people being ripped off for all sorts of things. What were you chatting about on that?
Really,
just intrigued.
This is a while ago. Well, it's about 3 years ago, I think, maybe less.
Oh, you need to update your CV a bit more. It came across as quite recent.
Oh really? Yeah. I can't remember.
And recently Rip Off Britain. Maybe I just read that bit in.
It was about, I'll tell you what it was about though. I do remember it. It was about sort of comfort dogs, anti-stress dogs in airports. And it was about this dog who was up, I can't remember which Scottish airport it was, some Scottish airport. And I think the feature on the Rip Off Britain program was all about the airport. And that really was the kind of the main thing, and the sort of things that go on at airports and some of the scams, probably in pricing and all of that would be my guess. And actually they'd come across this program, and they were asking some questions about sort of efficacy of those sort of programs, and they just wanted to get a take on it, so I talked about it for a bit and kind of said, well, not much of a science foundation really, and certainly specifically for airport, context.
So were they sort of, you could pay to go and hug a dog and it would reduce your stress for flying, or what were they claiming?
No, they weren't. I don't think they were charging. I think they had this animal available for anybody who was, I suppose, afraid of flying and was getting anxious about flying and just wanted to kind of go and hang out with this dog as a way of reducing stress. And it was.
Did you look at the dog, and the dog said, Dog says, I'm not getting on that plane.
So it's it was interesting, and of course it was, I remember it was at the time when there was I think quite a bit in the press about the thorny issue of emotional support dogs, and being a recognized thing in the US but not a recognized thing here, and some of the issues that have evolved around the situation as it currently is in the US, and kind of what's ahead for the UK, and there's some issues around that for sure.
And the other thing that jumped out, and I will let you go at some point, and we haven't even got to talk about any of your papers really, but again, it was just a blast from the past, was you mentioned about niche and Euro niche. And again, as a vet student, I went to one of the niche conferences. And that's the first time I met Georgia Mason. And Georgia had started off at Cambridge as an undergraduate with a view to being a vet, and then decided after the natural science tripos, don't want to be a vet, and did the work on stereotypic behaviour, and the rest is history. Is now over in Guelph. And it was quite interesting because Georgia and I are obviously the same age, and in my third year I was thinking of dropping out of vet school, but at Bristol there wasn't anything else I could do. So I completed the vet degree. And, I met her at the niche conference, and people don't know, niche and Euro niche. Niche stands for Network of Individuals and Campaigns for Humane Education. And I just not, I'd completely forgotten about it, although I've still got some of the books from that conference kicking around. And it sort of, that would have been late 80s. But you were, is it sort of involved in founding that organization, were you?
So when I rocked up, they had just recently basically been founded, Niche had, and I went along to, they held a meeting, and to be honest, that meeting was extraordinary in hindsight. I had no idea of the people who were there, really, most of them, but I did know that at least some of the kind of superstars of my animal welfare reading were there. So it had the likes of Marion Dawkins, but Mary Midgley was there. Amazing woman.
See, I remember that. And I also remember there was a talk about the ethics of animal use in TV, which I found fascinating, because they're saying sort of, well, would you put a fly in a spider's web to get a good history. And I remember Mary as well. She was brilliant.
Super.
And in the bar afterwards, she's just so lovely.
So she was a huge influence. I mean, I just that whole day was these absolute top speakers in animal welfare. And I was just absolutely wrapped up in it. I wasn't long in, I'd only arrived in Cambridge really. I thought, okay, I need to join this group. And so I became involved with the British group niche. And then they set up a Euro niche, as it was then, it's now Interniche, still going. And it was all about sort of trying to seek alternatives where animal use wasn't necessary or was being really ineffectively used. So, think about the sort of thousands of frog experiments that used to happen, where at school everybody would duly carve up their frogs, and the educational value of that was very debatable, and caused a huge problem for frogs, not just in the individual welfare, but for the species.
I tell you,
so many were collected.
In my biology A level, we did a rat dissection every week in biology. We had a laboratory nearby that just supplied them, and they usually had sort of interesting coloured dyes in them, but they would just, and got to be honest, we just didn't. It was just expected that you did that. You had a different one each week. But
the thing I liked about them too was they took it seriously. So they had a journal, which I don't know whether this journal still exists, even, called Frame, which was about alternatives in medical, FRAMA.
So was it not the charity Fund for the Replacement of Animals in Medical Experiments?
Yes, that's it. They had a journal. Yeah.
Ed Balls' dad, Michael Balls.
Oh right, really?
Yeah, it is. So Ed Balls, the politician, his dad was Michael Balls, who set up Frame.
Oh right, I didn't know that.
There we go.
They were actually funding research on alternatives and looking at is it more effective? Is it an effective replacement or not as an alternative? And trying to do that in a range of contexts, from third level education, but also secondary level education as well. And I was, as I was kind of going through my undergraduate course in Dublin at Trinity, I was, coming out of the shelter volunteering and all that, I was becoming very, very tuned in to all of that kind of thinking, not animal rights at all, but very much to animal welfare. And, that was the time at which I became a vegetarian, although then I subsequently ate fish. I just stopped, I was buying cruelty-free products. It was that first time in my life really where I was just really opening up to that. And then that led into doing a lot of reading before I showed up at the coffee for a coffee with Pat, about some of, Peter Singer, who was obviously more around animal rights and animal liberation. But my first husband had a fantastic library of books of animal welfare writers and science writers more broadly. So I had a really great time just reading those.
So I also remember that conference because of Andrew Lindsay, theologian from Oxford. And the reason why I remember is he said to me at dinner, "I have never met somebody as young as you, as cynical as you." I'm thinking, geez, and he's a philosopher. He must have met a lot of cynical people. I took it as a compliment, I think, at the time.
Gosh, he's a pastor. He's probably seen all sorts of things.
Exactly. but yeah, so I probably met you in the 80s, but didn't realise.
Yeah.
I said I met Georgia, and sort of, because Georgia was standing by a poster and we just ended up chatting and whatever. And that was.
So Georgia and I she was a year ahead of me in our PhD. We were great mates, still friends with her. And we talked about welfare.
Yeah. So she must have been. So I was just trying to think, because I must have been a student. I wonder if it was in my final year. I don't even know how I got to hear about the niche conference, but anyway, turned up, and so it's still going, because again, I haven't heard anything about that group. Interniche, it's called.
Interniches, and I kind of assumed years ago it had probably folded, but Lynette Hart is sort of in touch with it, and she mentioned to me, she said, "Oh yeah, that group that you helped found, Sandra, that's still going. They're doing some really great stuff still on alternatives." So I looked it up, and there's an interesting paper that was written, I don't know, maybe 10 years or something, which sort of sets out actually who they are and what they do, and some of the case studies, some of the examples of the kind of things that they do, which
okay,
interesting.
Yeah, I'll have to look them up again and see what's going on there in the humane education. So, well, we can now start talking about the things that I normally chat about. But I'm conscious of time. We've probably been going an hour and a half or more.
At least. Yeah.
But yeah, I probably ought to let you get back to your family, and maybe we ought to do a second one and talk about some of the research at some point. But is there anything you would like to chat about before we finish?
Let me think. I think
healthy active aging. I've got
I think
obviously the AI stuff.
There's a big area of interest for me in healthy active aging, has been for a while, and I think that's
happens at our age, doesn't it?
Indeed, yeah. But it is that disproportionate, growing part of our population, and what is it in? I can't remember. I think they reckon in 50 years' time there'll be another 8.6 million 65-year-olds and over just in the UK, which is the population of London, kind of thereabouts, just to give you a feel for the scale of this. So because people are living so much longer, they're not dying off, so that cohort is just getting bigger and bigger. And so the question that we have, the societal question we have, is actually, how do we support healthy active aging? And we get into some of the stuff that we covered in that book on economic benefits of pets. But when you look at the potential solutions to supporting healthy active aging, let's not forget companion animals, because they're part of the story. And so, I've been publishing and speaking on that quite a lot recently. But I've spoken about that a lot recently, so I'm not feeling like I really need to talk about it now.
Okay. I guess look up your stuff online. I'm sure they'll find it. Or look at the publications. It's out there.
Sounds awful, doesn't it? Yeah. It is. There's a lot more to come. I think one of the things I probably would like to talk about a bit is what I kind of finished my IAHIO conference. I did a plenary at the IAHIO annual conference just recently, and I think there's some things we're not talking about in HAI that we kind of need to talk about. And in the interest of time, otherwise we could actually be here all night.
I'd be quite happy.
Everybody else has gone to sleep long ago. Is the idea of the environmental impact of companion animals.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think, we're only beginning to start thinking about this, and not even start really doing research on it at all yet, but we need to.
Well, I've examined 2 PhD students in recent years on that, both from Maastricht. The first one, Bingertau So, and the second one was her supervisor,
Really?
Pim Martens. And so, and the interesting thing is they were looking at what they call the ecological paw print in China, Japan, and the Netherlands. And it's interesting because obviously they're very different. And when you think about a place like China, the pet ownership levels are lower, but when you think about the number of people involved, and also you think about how much land is used for producing food, etc. It's a fascinating area, and as you say, it's something that we need much more on, and I'm sure both and Ness know it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Merton's kind of the ecological portrait. I really liked that work when I read it, and I thought, okay, that's potentially a useful tool for looking at the sustainability of different aspects of pet ownership itself and the products that they consume. There's a couple of people now writing interesting stuff on this, but I mean, I guess there are some choices ahead, aren't there? Just like I'm not meaning to pick companion animals out as some sort of kind of villain, as it were, of environmental impact. It's just that we're in a crisis. We're in an environmental crisis, and therefore we have to look at every aspect of our lives and how we can reduce the environmental impact of whether that's the clothes I wear, how I furnish my house, the car I drive, whatever it is, and also companion animals. And let's face it, about half of the households in the UK alone have pets, so it's a lot. It's a big impact. I mean, some of the stats when you start looking at are fairly hair-raising. So, like the calories consumed by pets in the US are about the same as the calories consumed by people in the whole of France. just to give you a kind of there are some nice kind of, stats like that. And so we have choices, I think, about the species of animals we choose as companion animals, maybe the breed, the size, I mean, yes, there's a global trend towards smaller dogs anyway. This is the moment for cats, clearly.
There we go.
You knew I'd bring it back to that. But also actually, maybe birds, maybe rodents that aren't as dependent on meat-based diets. And there's also lots to do in looking at the recipes, the type of recipes that are used, the processes involved in making those as environmentally friendly as possible, and so on and so on. I think, it's time, because actually we don't have that much time to look at our lives and make differences, to think about what we can do as individuals. And I think the industry as a whole actually as well, which, I mean, I know they are beginning to think about this and have been for some time. We're starting to see, because of course pet manufacturing was a scavenger industry originally. You used the parts of meat that were perfectly fine nutritionally but weren't used in the human chain. Not so much now, because of the scarcity of parts of food, particularly protein. And so now, things like insect diets are now becoming mainstream. So Purina, all these, the big manufacturers, it's not just the little niche companies are now producing alternative forms of protein. And so I think that's something for each of us, as well as a societal issue that we need to look at. So I think there's that is a biggie. And I think one of the other biggies, back to cats, is cat predation. And so, looking at that whole question of domestication of cats and the selection for predatory drive and efficiency, and, perhaps exploring, just like we've selected dogs for different jobs, could we actually deselect that in cats? Or could we select something that is sort of mutually exclusive with that? Or how could we select for a companion animal that actually has attributes that are more in line with what people want it to be? And I'm saying that carefully because obviously in many parts of the world, people are still very keen that cats do keep their predatory skills because they are still used as pest control. But there are many, many people who have cats who they don't need that, and they're not looking for that, and they get upset about that when cats do what cats do, and bring you a little carcass present at the end of the evening.
I'll tell you, it's funny because this gives people who are not in academia, this is the sort of thing I do during my working day. I emailed the Azerbaijani tourist board today. It's not because I've suddenly switched off and stopped listening to. It's because cats were probably domesticated in that region of the Fertile Crescent. And I wanted some copyright-free images that I could actually use in some of my lectures. And that's the sort of thing you do in academia. You spend your working life asking the Azerbaijani tourist industry if you can get some pictures you can use in your talks. Because I mean, everybody's so hot now on copyright. And I just think, well, I've not been there. It'd be probably not very ecologically friendly to go and fly to Azerbaijan to take some pictures of some of the regions. But yeah, and it's interesting because, as I said, sort of, we think that that's probably one of the main regions where cats were originally domesticated in that area. But no, I think it's a really important point. And yeah, can we breed for it? When I chatted with Dennis Turner, he's produced quite an interesting paper, which is in French, but he will give you an English translation as long as you cite the French original. They're happy for it to be given away free, about thinking about predation in cats and what the issues are. Is that your cat making a noise in the background? No, or is it your bangle or something?
Oh, might be my watch.
Oh, it'd be but yeah, I mean, maybe we're gonna sort of need more vermin control, who knows? But at the same time, the damage done to wildlife in certain situations we've got to be careful of. But as you say, that ecological pawprint, I think, is a serious issue that and it involves some uncomfortable choices, because I examine let's say a couple of the theses in it, when he starts to translate that into how many people you can feed in parts of the world where, you know, people are going hungry, you do start to sit back and think, yeah, we do need to think about the choices we make and the impact that it has. So that's all very serious, isn't it?
It is a bit serious,
but it is, I guess keeping the planet going is probably quite an important topic. So
yeah, it is. Yeah, and that said, I think, you know, there's lots of other cat research as well that needs to be. I don't know that I'm finished yet completely with cat behavior research.
Well, now you got the visiting position at
ideas.
Lincoln. Now you got the visiting position at Lincoln. We'll draw up some cat projects together. Yeah, maybe I ought to get Pim on for one of these and ask him to do one of them, and talk about the ecological paw print. I'd say maybe could try and do a round table, but I think I'm a terrible chair. I'm a terrible host anyway. Just prattle on anyway. But I ought to let you go, because I did say, and people don't know what time this is recorded, but I did say I'd let you go by 9 o'clock, and it's very nearly 9 o'clock. It's been lovely to catch up with you once again.
Thank you.
As I said, I have the benefit that I know I'll be seeing more of you very soon, for too long. Thank you for giving up this evening and sharing. And as I said, I've really enjoyed it. I hope it's not been too traumatic for you. And we'll speak again soon. Take care.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dan.
Thanks a lot.
Take care. Bye.